England, 1847. The chandeliers of Fairfax House glowed like captured sunlight, throwing warm gold across polished floors and silk gowns. Music filled the air, and laughter rose and fell as London's finest moved through the grand ballroom. For most, the spring ball was a night of joy and display. For Miss Amelia Godric, it would become the night her life broke apart. Amelia stood near the refreshment table, gently twisting the lace edge of her pale blue gown between her fingers. At 22, she was quietly beautiful, not the sort to demand attention, but the kind whose grace revealed itself slowly. Her chestnut hair was arranged neatly, her posture calm, her smile polite. Yet beneath that calm unease pressed heavily against her chest. "You seem rather thoughtful this evening, Miss Godric," Lady Harrington said, her sharp eyes missing nothing. "One would expect more excitement from a bride-to-be." Amelia smiled as she had been taught. "Forgive me, Lady Harrington. I find the evening a little overwhelming." "You must grow accustomed to such gatherings," the older woman replied. "As the future Countess Fairfax, you will host many." The words landed heavily. Amelia's engagement to Edmund Fairfax had never been about affection. It was an agreement made years ago between families. Her father needed security. Edmund needed advantage. Love had never been part of the bargain. Yet even so, Amelia had expected loyalty. Lady Harrington scanned the room. "I find it curious that your fiancé is nowhere to be seen, nor your dear friend, Miss Ashworth." Amelia's heart tightened. Edmund and Viola were indeed absent. "Perhaps they stepped outside," she said, though doubt crept into her voice. The elderly woman leaned closer. "I have lived long enough to recognize impropriety when I see it. The way Mr. Fairfax looks at Miss Ashworth is not the way a man should look at his betrothed's closest friend." Heat rose to Amelia's cheeks. "I'm sure you're mistaken." "I hope so, my dear," Lady Harrington said softly, before drifting away. Amelia stood frozen as uncertainty took root. Viola Ashworth had been her closest friend since childhood. Beautiful, confident, and wealthy. She had shared Amelia's secrets and fears. Amelia forced herself to believe trust still mattered. She searched the ballroom. Edmund was nowhere, nor Viola. The footman confirmed they had not gone to the terrace. Only the library and conservatory remained. The library door stood slightly open. Light spilled into the hall. As Amelia approached, voices reached her ears. "Edmund, we cannot go on like this," Viola said, her voice trembling. "It isn't fair to Amelia." "Fairness has nothing to do with marriage," Edmund replied coldly. "My engagement to Amelia is business. Her father's connections benefit me. That is all." "And love?" Viola asked. There was a pause, then the soft rustle of fabric. "If love exists at all," Edmund said, "it belongs to you." The world seemed to stop. Amelia stood motionless, her chest aching as each word struck her like a blow. She should have turned away. Instead, she pushed the door open. Edmund stood with Viola in his arms. His hand rested at her waist. They sprang apart. "Amelia," Viola whispered. "Don't," Amelia said quietly. "Please don't insult me." Edmund adjusted his coat, his expression distant. "You are overreacting. Marriage is about advantage." "I agreed to dignity," Amelia said, her voice steady despite her shaking hands. "Not humiliation." "How long?" she asked. Edmund answered without hesitation. 6 months. Amelia turned away before her tears could fall. Whispers followed her as she fled through the ballroom and into the garden. Cool night air filled her lungs as she struggled to breathe. Her engagement was ruined, her friendship destroyed. By morning, all of London would know. "Are you unwell, Miss Godric?" She turned sharply. A tall man stood nearby, his presence commanding yet calm. George Cavendish, Duke of Ashford, one of England's most powerful men, and one of its most distant. "I'm quite well," Amelia lied. He studied her with quiet understanding. "You are not." Something in his voice broke her restraint. "I've discovered my fiancé and my closest friend have betrayed me," she said. "The shame is theirs. the Duke replied. Not yours, but society will blame me, Amelia said. I will be remembered only as the woman discarded. The Duke was silent for a moment. Then he said, What if you were remembered instead as the woman who caught a Duke's interest? She stared at him. I propose an arrangement, he continued. Allow me to escort you back inside. I will make my regard for you unmistakably clear. Why? She asked. I have little patience for dishonorable men, he said, extending his hand. After a brief hesitation, Amelia placed her hand in his. The effect was immediate. As they entered the ballroom together, conversation halted. Eyes followed them. Edmund's face darkened. Viola turned pale. The Duke led Amelia to the center of the room. He raised his hand, and the music stopped. Ladies and gentlemen, he said, his voice calm yet commanding, I find myself compelled to share that I have been thoroughly captivated this evening. Miss Amelia Godric has granted me the honor of her company, and I intend to call upon her tomorrow. Gasps filled the room. Amelia met his gaze, her heart racing. For the first time that night, she felt something stir beneath her pain. Not shame, defiance, hope. As the Duke drew her into the waltz, the whispers began, and Amelia understood one truth clearly. Her life had changed forever. By morning, London was awake with gossip. Carriages rolled through the streets carrying whispers instead of passengers. Drawing rooms filled with speculation. By noon, the story had settled into a single thrilling version. Amelia Godric had been publicly claimed by the Duke of Ashford on the very night her engagement to Edmund Fairfax collapsed. Amelia sat by the window of her family's townhouse, hands folded in her lap, watching the street below. Sleep had come only in brief moments. Each time she closed her eyes, she saw Edmund's face in the library, cold and careless. Then she saw the Duke's steady gaze in the garden, calm and certain. At precisely 2 o'clock, the sound of a carriage stopped outside. He is punctual, Amelia's mother whispered, already smoothing her gown for the 3rd time. The Duke of Ashford was announced, and George Cavendish entered the room with quiet authority. He bowed first to Amelia's parents, then turned to her. You look well, he said, his tone gentle. Better than I feel, Amelia replied honestly. Once outside, George spoke plainly. Our appearance last night achieved its purpose, he said. Society is no longer focused on Fairfax's behavior. Amelia nodded. But now they are focused on us.
Yes, George replied.
Which means our arrangement must continue for a short time. She studied him carefully. You still wish it to remain an arrangement? For now, he said. I will not pretend affection I do not feel, but neither will I allow your reputation to suffer. Amelia appreciated his honesty.
And what is expected of me?
Only that you allow me to court you openly, he replied. Appear with me, accept my company. Nothing more. She hesitated, then nodded. Very well. That afternoon marked the beginning of a transformation Amelia had never imagined. George escorted her to dinners, musicales, and private gatherings. He spoke to her as an equal, asked her opinions, listened without impatience. Society watched closely, expecting arrogance from the Duke and submission from Amelia. Instead, they saw respect. Edmund Fairfax did not remain silent. He attempted to call at the Godric residence, but George ensured he was refused. Letters followed, sharp and accusing, then pleading. Amelia read none of them. One evening at a gathering hosted by Lady Harrington, Edmund confronted them openly. You are enjoying this far too much, he said to Amelia, his voice low with resentment. You forget yourself. I remember myself very clearly, Amelia replied. For the first time, George stepped forward. You have no further claim here. Edmund's eyes burned with fury. You think this will end well? George met his gaze without flinching. I know it will. That night, Amelia learned of Edmund's true nature. Viola Ashworth approached her quietly on the terrace, her confidence gone. He is dangerous, Viola whispered. He uses people. He used me. Amelia listened, torn between anger and sorrow. Viola admitted Edmund had pursued her deliberately, promising marriage if his engagement ended. When she resisted, he threatened her reputation. "I was afraid," Viola said. "I made terrible choices." Amelia said nothing at first. The betrayal still cut deeply, yet she saw now that Edmund's cruelty ran deeper than vanity. George took the warning seriously. "I will handle Fairfax," he told Amelia later. "You need not fear him." Their partnership grew stronger with each shared confidence. Amelia began to realize that what began as protection was becoming something else. She found herself watching George when he was not looking, noting the way his reserve softened when he smiled, the way his voice lowered when he spoke to her alone. One evening, after a long walk, George spoke words that changed everything. "I have not intended to deceive you," he said, "but my feelings have shifted." Amelia's breath caught. So have mine. Silence stretched between them, heavy and honest. "I will not ask for what you cannot give," George said. "But I would be lying if I said I feel nothing." Amelia met his eyes. "Nor would I." The decision came quietly, without drama. George proposed not as a shield, but as a man who had chosen. Amelia accepted not out of safety but desire. Their engagement was announced at a crowded ball, met with astonishment and approval. Edmund Fairfax watched from the shadows, defeated. Within weeks, he left society entirely. The wedding followed in early summer. Amelia walked down the aisle not as a bargaining piece, but as a woman who had reclaimed her worth. As George took her hand, she knew the truth. Betrayal had not ended her story. It had redirected it, and love, real and steady, had found her where she least expected it. The morning of Amelia's wedding arrived, with soft sunlight spilling through the tall windows of her bedchamber. London stirred beyond the glass, unaware that what had begun as gossip and spectacle was about to settle into something real and lasting. Amelia stood still as her maid adjusted the final pins in her hair. The ivory gown rested lightly on her shoulders, simple yet elegant. She looked at her reflection and barely recognized the woman staring back. The quiet girl who once accepted her future without question was gone. In her place stood someone steadier, stronger, and awake to her own worth. Her mother entered the room, eyes already shining with tears. "You look beautiful," she said, her voice thick with emotion. "I only wish your grandmother could have seen this day." "So do I," Amelia replied softly. Her father followed soon after, pride written plainly on his face. He offered his arm, and together they descended the stairs and stepped into the waiting carriage. At St. George's, Hanover Square, the church was filled. Nobility and merchants sat side by side, all drawn by the unlikely union that had captured London's imagination. When the doors opened and Amelia stepped inside, a hush fell over the room. At the altar stood George. He was calm, composed, yet his eyes betrayed him. When he saw Amelia walking toward him, something softened in his expression. For a man known for restraint, it was unmistakable devotion. As Amelia reached him, George took her hand. His grip was steady, grounding her. "You are radiant," he whispered. "So are you," she replied. The vows were spoken clearly, without hesitation. Amelia felt no doubt as she promised her life to him. George's voice did not waver when he vowed the same. When the Archbishop declared them husband and wife, George kissed her gently, as though sealing something precious rather than claiming it. Outside, bells rang and cheers rose. Amelia stepped into the sunlight as the Duchess of Ashford, her hand firmly held in George's. Life after marriage did not slow. Letters arrived daily. Invitations followed. Society watched closely, waiting for cracks in the fairy tale. They never came. At Ashford House, Amelia learned her new role quickly. She did not attempt to imitate the women before her. Instead, she listened, observed, and acted with quiet confidence. She hosted gatherings that favored conversation over display. She welcomed people others overlooked. Slowly, opinions shifted. George watched it all with admiration. "You don't perform," he told her one evening. "You simply are." Amelia smiled. "So are you." Their marriage settled into something neither had fully expected. It was not dramatic or overwhelming. It was steady, honest, built on shared respect. They spoke often about business, about travel, about ideas Amelia had never been invited to share before. George valued her thoughts, not as decoration, but as insight. One autumn evening, news arrived that Edmund Fairfax had left England entirely. "He has no allies left," George said quietly. His patterns caught up with him. Amelia felt no triumph, only relief. Viola's name surfaced once more in a letter delivered weeks later. She wrote from the countryside where she had gone to live quietly with an aunt. Her words were careful, apologetic, sincere. Amelia did not respond immediately. It was winter before she did. Her reply was brief. She did not offer forgiveness, but she offered peace. That was enough. Spring returned, and with it a sense of renewal. George proposed a journey abroad. "You once said you wished to see the world," he said. "I would like to show it to you." They traveled through France, then onward. Amelia saw cities she had only known from books. She listened to languages she did not yet understand. George watched her take it all in, her curiosity bright and unguarded. "I never knew freedom could feel like this," Amelia said one evening as they stood overlooking the sea. George smiled. "Neither did I." Years passed gently, their home filled with laughter, with music, with long conversations late into the night. When disagreements arose, they faced them directly, without cruelty or silence. London society adjusted to the truth. The Duke of Ashford was no longer distant. The Duchess was no longer underestimated. They were respected, together. One quiet night, Amelia sat beside George in the garden of their country estate. Fireflies glimmered softly around them. "Do you ever think about that night at Fairfax House?" she asked. George considered. "Often, so do I," Amelia said, not with pain, with gratitude. "If not for that betrayal," George said slowly, "we might never have met as we truly are." Amelia leaned her head against his shoulder. "Strange how life works." George kissed her hair. "It breaks us open, then offers us something better." Amelia closed her eyes content. She had been betrayed. She had been humiliated. And yet, she had been found. Not rescued, chosen, by a man who saw her fully and by herself.